if you don't know what we mean by right sizing, there is a trend that we've seen in the automotive industry towards larger vehicles. So increasing sizes both for passenger vehicles and for things like pickups. And the question is, like, why do we not see the shrinkflation that we see with everything else happening in vehicle sizes? Especially given the fact that we know that for each 100 kilogram of extra weight that a vehicle has, it produces around 2 grams of carbon extra per kilometre that it's used. And that we also know that if we shifted to smaller vehicles, we can save massive amounts of energy. The other thing that, as a personal thing, I have another job where I'm an ER nurse, so I look at injury statistics. And seeing the injury statistics for larger vehicles is obviously very concerning. Larger vehicles, SUVs, for example, produced around, or were involved in around 15% of accidents, but were involved in around 22 to 25% of fatalities. So when you're looking at the size of vehicles, it's really important to think about like these longer term impacts as the size of vehicles is increasing. So we have this awesome panel of people to talk about both why it's happening, what we can do about it, and really just get into the nitty-gritty of this kind of challenging problem that's facing us as we try and transition to electric vehicles, which do have needs for their batteries. So if I can get us to just go down the line and introduce ourselves in 1 to 2 sentences.
Dave Haberman, neighborhood electric vehicle specialist from Chemainus on Vancouver Island. You'll notice that I'm the only one that doesn't have a label underneath. Is there anybody here that has a neighborhood electric vehicle that they're using on the road right now? No, none of you. That's why I don't really have a job.
Thank you. I'm Ali Kazamkhani. I'm the founder CEO of Embo Drive Systems. My focus in this conversation would be micromobility, and right sizing for me doesn't have a limit. It can be right sized the way it should be right sized.
Good afternoon, my name is David Adams. I'm the President and CEO of the Global Automakers of Canada, which is a national trade association representing 16 of the vehicle manufacturers in Canada.
Good afternoon, my name is Simon Upshaw. I'm Manager of Fleet Operations and Maintenance for the City of Victoria. Right sizings, especially as we move into EV, it's moving from a work vehicle that people have been used to using and trying to transition them into something smaller that fits in the roads better, can drive down the street without getting into as many accidents as well, as you mentioned. The safety aspect of it is incredibly important.
Thank you so much, everyone. So just a couple of quick ground rules. So at the end of this session, we will be having time for questions. If you can try and keep those questions to actually being questions, that's great, because we want to hear what these folks have to say. And I will give you a heads up a few minutes before the end so you have time to think about what you want to ask, because I'm sure that what they say will spur some really fascinating thoughts. So I think if we start with you, David, what do you think is driving the trend towards larger vehicles?
Well, I think, let me first ask a question of the audience. How many people, if you want to raise your hand, drive an SUV or a pickup truck?
It's a small one.
So a number of you. That's interesting. Maybe just some statistics for the first part. I was looking at the August sales statistics, and about 87% of the vehicles that were sold in Canada in August were sport utility vehicles or pickup trucks. If you wind the clock back August 2004, so 20 years ago, that number was about 44%, I believe. So there's been a significant increase in the number of trucks and SUVs. Why is that the case? Well, one of the reasons that that's the case is because what's classified as a sport utility vehicle these days, in some cases, is very much a passenger car platform, just with a larger body on it. So that has to do with part of the equation. I think the other thing that is driving that is, frankly, consumer demands. Manufacturers aren't necessarily in the habit of building the types and styles of vehicles that consumers don't want to buy. So that's definitely a factor in the growth of vehicles as well. And the manufacturers, frankly, have a role in that too. Sometimes what you'll see just in terms of placing their vehicles in their model lineup, they will grow a vehicle up perhaps a little bit in size in order to place another smaller vehicle underneath that. So again, to flesh out their entire model lineup.
Thank you so much. So, Ali, do you have any thoughts on why right sizing hasn't happened, why we still keep getting bigger vehicles?
Right sizing to me means when we don't move 2 tons of metal box to just move a person of 80 kilogram weight or a box of groceries purchased from point A to point B. And to me, we are 10 years in business and we're observing different attempts to fix this situation, and it's a chicken and egg situation in the micromobility space. You, all the audience here can witness, maybe you have a bunch of names in mind of businesses who attempted to put a new 3-wheeler or 4-wheeler small vehicle can be used as a personal transporter or as a low speed vehicle, and they all failed. The problem is both. You can't blame adoption of people or the industry which is not addressing the products to the market. It's the chicken and egg situation. And because right sizing or micromobility is talking about niche use cases, the thing that an SUV can do in order to bring all of those expectations into a smaller vehicle, you need to design and develop a specific vehicle to that use case. And that niche is a bad keyword in business development. Niche means lack of market and failure of businesses.
And one of the things that you touched on there with the niche and the design to a specific use case, I think that really speaks to something that you've been working on, Dave, because you are interested in NEVs and LSEVs, and that is a specific use case that has traditionally been met by niche automakers. I know that you've been trying to work towards building a pilot so that people can try out NEVs and experience them day to day. How has that been going, and what progress have you made?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of background for neighborhoods in British Columbia. So going back in 2008, the province of BC adopted NZEV neighborhood zero emission vehicle bylaw 24.06 of the BC Transportation Act. And it's very much the same that's been used across the US. So that started it out, and one would have thought that it would have been enough to kind of get things going. We've only got 31 of 161 municipalities in British Columbia that have adopted that bylaw, and that's a bit of an issue. And along with the bylaw also comes a neighborhood NZV permit area. That's where you're allowed to drive them. Now, when I talk to a municipality and try to get them in, the first thing they say, well, Dave, if you don't have any vehicles, it's a little bit academic bringing it in right now. Of course, my answer is if you don't have the legislation in, it's pretty hard to bring the manufacturers in to be able to. So again, it goes back to your chicken and egg principle. So the best way for us to get ahead on it, Quebec has finished a pilot, Ontario's got one going right now. British Columbia doesn't, although I'll touch on that a little bit later here. And that is the way to convince our municipalities to get going, bring it in. It's very easy to adopt it in. And then after that, we can start going to the manufacturers and start to bring in some of these amazing vehicles. We have a few here that are actually built right here in British Columbia.
So it sounds like we have this confluence of challenges. We have automakers who have platforms that they want to use for multiple purposes. We have a history of often things being, quote, niche. And then we have a challenging legislative environment in which you might have a smaller vehicle that you want to bring to a place or you want to use in a place. And that can really be something that you can't get there just because of the legislative environment. And I imagine that with fleet vehicles, that can be a discussion that you have to have when you're trying to decide about the size of vehicles and what you need in your fleet. Is that something that has been an issue for you, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges for, I guess, the North American market is that they like their big vehicles. The consumers, they love their big vehicles. So they like the 2500s, they like the 3500s. So one of the things that we've worked on is as we've transitioned to EV is done an evaluation of what the toolbox looks like. So take out everything from the vehicle, put it on the ground, let's look at the cubic space, and then go over what those 90% options are. What do you use 90% of the time, and what needs to be carried 90% of the time? And then look at the 10% in a different light. So then what we do is we put that together and we look at what the smallest vehicle we can fit, just maybe sometimes go one size up. We've been moving most of our 3500 type trucks down to F-150s. All of our 2500 trucks down to F-150s. The problem that I have right now is that there isn't a nice compact pickup to move into. The Ford Lightning is hitting a very nice market, but there's no compact pickup really on the market yet that really fits that mark, except for maybe the Rivian, which is more of a sport utility style. But for a fleet, the F-150 Pro model is a fleet truck, and it's they've hit a nice mark on it. So we're excited to move most of our trucks into that transition, and it fits the toolbox, and that's that 90 percentile that we're trying to fit it into.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I understand that Ford have delayed the Maverick as well, so it's going to be a
Maverick
challenge
one,
moving forward.
Yeah.
And it looked like you had something you wanted to add to that.
Well, maybe just to pivot off of one thing that Simon said, and I think that's the reality. I think a lot of people go to purchase their vehicles. They're purchasing their vehicle based on that 2 weeks vacation they're going to take in a year where they may need to tow a boat or a camper or something like that. And so, well, you can find another alternative for that 2 week scenario. You don't even necessarily purchase that big a vehicle. But that tends to be what consumers do because they don't want that inconvenience of having to make that alternative arrangement, which is a challenge. And I want to go back to one of the things that Dave said as well about the regulatory environment, because that is pivotal in terms of getting alternative choices on the road. And in the absence of an appropriate regulatory environment, what you end up having is a bit of the Wild West where you have the micromobility devices available, but they're not regulated, so it ends up being, these devices on sidewalks, on the street, wherever, people not wearing appropriate safety equipment, not knowing the rules of the road, how they should be operated, and then it just becomes almost a negative for the adoption of some of these micromobility devices because it is just perceived as the Wild West and no regulation.
So I actually, that kind of leads into a question I'd love to ask Ali is, have you experienced challenges with the regulatory environment around things like the utility personal vehicle?
The regulation has been there, we have a LSE regulation already adopted by most municipalities and can be used to allow smaller four-wheeler platforms or three-wheeler platforms on the roads to be used as personal transporter. Instead of the 2-ton, you can carry 200 kilogram or 400 kilogram vehicle, still get the convenience of whatever that vehicle provides you for shopping, for going, for commuting, for taking kids to school. But again, the problem here is the thing that we have observed is the industry, is the chicken and egg issue in this industry. And the approach that we are taking to break through that chicken and egg is suggesting the platform solution instead of product. So the concept of UPT that we have introduced in this show, we unveiled it yesterday, is basically an attempt to break through this problem and issue of chicken and egg and offer mass customization for the industry. Mass customization allows you to mass produce components, but without necessarily to mass produce the products. The products can still be niche. The products that are built based on mass produced components. So this is the solution that I believe, as one of the industry leaders in this space, that is going to be the future, and that's it.
So one of the interesting things that we've seen is that in Europe there has been a significant rise in low-speed EVs and smaller vehicles that the electric quadricycle is often the term applied to them because they don't have to meet such stringent standards and such stringent crash requirements as larger vehicles, and they're used primarily in cities and just the very edge of rural areas. And we haven't really seen that growth here yet, and it's really interesting to think about how what you're doing and what you're doing here, they can influence that position. But my question right this moment is, do you think, Dave, that there should be government incentives, government changes to the requirements for vehicles to make that use case stronger?
Well, I'm going to say that, in the case of the province of BC, I'm going to argue that they've already done their job. So it's been handed down to the municipalities. And I'm going to tell you something that's going to break a big myth right now on neighborhood electrics on that specific bylaw. And this goes right across North America because it all came originally from the free trade agreement. So the bylaw states that vehicle goes no more than 40 kilometers an hour. There is no limit on size. There is no limit on weight. So that means that every single electric vehicle that you see driving on the road today can be an NEV with one single change. Drop the speed to a limit of 40 kilometers an hour. And what this means is that Tesla Cybertruck, for Lightning, everything that's out there has the opportunity of being shrunk down to an NEV by limiting that speed. And now your battery, if you won't have to put on, like you're saying, 30, 50 kilometers a day, you don't need a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack. Maybe you can get by with 20. You're not packing along a lot of weight. And so that's part of this, as we say, right sizing. So that's the one thing I think that's very, very important, that we have to break that as soon as you talk neighborhoods, that you're talking small. Here in North America, small we just aren't in small vehicles.
David, do you have any thoughts on government plans or government possibilities of legislation that might incentivize smaller vehicle production?
Well, I guess what I would say is that there's, I think a couple of weeks ago in the United States, a congressperson introduced legislation around this issue, more from a personal safety perspective, pedestrians, cyclists. This reality is that the larger vehicles contribute to more fatalities and accidents. The increase has been something like over 80% as the vehicles have grown over the last 15, 20 years. So that's the impetus, I think, for looking at some sort of legislation that would start to restrict the size of vehicles. Having said that, I don't know, maybe the audience can tell us, but I'm not sure how many individuals are interested in sort of being dictated to what type of vehicle they should or shouldn't buy. I mean, we already see this in the automotive industry to a certain extent with the zero-emission vehicle mandates that are in place, pushing everybody towards electric. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of electric vehicles. I've driven a couple in my history as well, and it's superior technology. But I think there's a way to move that needle. The focus should be, from my perspective, on greenhouse gas emissions reduction. I think that's something that we can all agree on, and that's part of the rationale for looking at what's the best device, mobility product to get you where you need to go.
Is that something that, Ali, that you feel that you can fit in as a company and as a concept, the idea of making sure that people have access to the right vehicle at the right size to meet their needs regardless of the regulatory environment?
I didn't catch your question.
So do you think that the concept of smaller utility vehicles is something that, regardless of the regulatory environment, you can you can see people getting behind.
Yes, of course. And BC is the right place to talk this concept because there is a lot of passion in this part of the world about sustainability and efficiency that I see in the individuals. I haven't seen. I've lived in different continents. I have that experience. I haven't seen that much, this much of passion anywhere else in the world. This is the right part of the world to talk about these things. And adoption will not be a problem if the availability and regulation problem solves.
Thank you. So we have just under 10 minutes left. Do we have questions?
Hi, I think jumped in. So I kind of disagree with a bit of that. One of the things around what is being made once available. Some automakers are not even building cars anymore. They're only focused on oversized SUVs. I went downstairs. I was trying to find. I want to find a small electric vehicle. Sorry, I probably want something in a real car size. Something about the Golf Mini thing. And I'm even seeing vehicles that have gotten bigger to get electrified, and they're blaming pedestrian safety. They're saying the hood needs to be taller because if they hit a pedestrian, they need to fall over it. And I'm like, well, it's a giant hood now. So I'm still wondering, does government need to step in? Does government need to regulate? Because the industry won't. They only give us what they want to sell, which seems to be the expensive large vehicle. I see it as the SUVs get taller and minivans get taller as well, their headlights go up. So now we're being blinded as pedestrians by these taller vehicles. And there should be some regulation. Put it to the panel.
So I'm going to guess, David, you have some thoughts on that. And I think it's also really interesting as a point to think about is that the European crash standards and the American crash standards, while they're very similar in many ways, they have a lot of really important minor differences, which often means that a vehicle that would pass crash standards in Europe would need different airbag placement, different reinforcement to pass crash standards in the US or in Canada. And that means that automakers, I think, are a little reticent to bring smaller vehicles over, but I don't know if you have other thoughts about that.
No, you're right. The standards are different in Europe compared to North America. North America, in a lot of ways, has some more stringent standards, and that becomes a problem when companies are looking to homologate vehicles for the North American market. So we can say, well, Canada is maybe different from the U.S., and this has sort of been our history in a lot of ways, where you can tell by the lack of my hair and the color of it that I'm old. I've been around for a bit, but it used to be that our market was a lot more sort of European. So we haven't had more of a European flavor to our market and tended to have more of a European model mix as well. Largely, what we get in Canada is dictated by the United States, what the United States market wants, because you can't justify it from a market basis to bring a model specifically for the Canadian market. Companies have done that a little bit in the past. Smart was a good example in the past. Mercedes brought the Smart here, and a few other vehicles, but it's normally not done because of cost prohibitive.
It has been, for those who don't know, live in the United States. I'm very sorry. But it has been really nice being up here and seeing Nissan Micras, because they're I'm British by birth, and seeing Micras again, I'm like, oh, look at them, they're so cute. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to toss in and just help answer this gentleman's question down here. There's a 1, 2, 3 solution. Do you mind me asking which municipality you live in? In where? Vancouver. Wow, you're way ahead of the game. The 1, 2, 3. 1, bring in the bylaw. 2, identify the area that you can drive. And this is just neighborhood electrics, because that's what I'm hearing from you, that you're looking at. And then
What's
the
that?
third one.
Europe has 70
Just
kilometer
go bring in
NEVs.
neighborhood electric.
That
Pick
makes
which one
them viable.
and
40 is not viable. 70, you could do it as an
That one
city
that's over there
vehicle.
that we see that Waves got would be a perfect one. Put it into the municipal
Yeah,
fleet.
it doesn't work. No,
And it has
you
the city of
need
Vancouver
70.
on it. It's driving around
It doesn't
town.
work
Somebody
without
is
70.
in that, whether they're watering the plants or picking up garbage at the park, and can answer the public's question. And when they see these vehicles on the road, then they start to understand how it drifts down to the public.
Parking stalls.
That's where I believe that it has to start. It's all at the
Those are kind
municipal
of like,
level.
you can't do those
And
because
I talked to lots of municipalities. I'm
500 watt
going to leave you
problem.
one more,
So you
just something to kind of take away with. Inevitably, when I'm sitting there, of
1250
course, the
bikes
issue of
as
safety
an
comes up.
enclosed structure, as a destination.
And I
we
think that
need
they've done
70
everything that's necessary,
kilometers
and just in
and
case,
east
this is what
until
my
those regulatory
response
hurdles
is
are
when I
cleared.
go through this.
None of this works.
The Suzuki Hayabusa will break every single speed limit in North America in first gear. This is a super bike along with about 25 of them on there, and if you think that you're worried about safety, then why have we legislated or allowed these bikes all around the world, and we're coming in worried about a little vehicle that goes 40 kilometers an hour, and it's got far more safety that's in there. And by the way, I'm a sport bike enthusiast, so I don't want them changing the rules, but I'm just saying that there's what my response is for whatever it's worth.
Did you want to add something, Simon?
Very quickly, I'll just mention a couple things. One, I completely agree. Walking around, what I've noticed is that we're catering to a very high-end market in most of the EV market, and we're not really seeing. There's a gap in between, right? There's the SUV market. There's that compact car market, and I'll just use Chevy Bolt. The Chevy Bolt. We have a bunch in our fleet. It's a great vehicle. It's got great range, 320 kilometers, and Chevy doesn't sell it anymore. And it's a shame. It's a nice, small, compact vehicle that works for municipal fleets. We've got 2 of them that do our parking ambassadors that run around and they've got cameras on them so they pick up license plates. We've got a few other that run for a bylaw. The other thing that we are looking at as well is I haven't seen the booth here yet today, but SC Carts, which is made out of Vernon, they build a low-speed vehicle that's insured by ICBC, and they're a perfect little vehicle that we're starting to look at and bring into our fold. We have one already, but we're bringing in a few others for our parking group that used to ride around on Honda Ruckuses but talk about safety, right? Honda Ruckus riding around, and especially in our falls with the leaves and everything on the ground, they're not very safe to be on the road. So putting them in a small, low-speed vehicle is much better. The biggest problem also is the cost when you make those changes, jumping up. But there needs to be more of that small compact. I talked about the light-duty truck or the small compact truck. Great example. It's just not in the market yet, which is unfortunate.
Okay, so we have time for one more really quick question. I'm sorry, I didn't realize there'd be so many questions, but we will be over at the side and able to take some more. But if we can have one more quick question.
I hate to beat up on the big vehicles again, but that Hummer X3 down there, 205 kilowatt capacity battery. I drive a Chevy Bolt. That is more than 3 times the capacity of my Chevy Bolt, more than 3 times the cost of my Chevy Bolt. The battery pack's curb weight, my Bolt's curb weight is less than that of just the battery pack of that vehicle. It's about 250 Envo bike batteries worth of capacity. Given these vehicles are very expensive, one person I know who owns one of those, it's his 3rd vehicle. A lot of consumer vehicles are parked 90% of the time. That is 3 delivery vehicles, medium weight freight vehicles that could be running around all the time. That's a lot of vehicles not on the road because we've invested all that lithium in that one vehicle. Do you think regulators need to step up and do something about this insanity, and what tools do we have to dissuade the market from leading us down these paths where we invest all this carbon in building these huge vehicles only to have them parked in some guy's 3rd garage?
Okay, it's up to the panel.
Maybe to respond to that, I think you're right in the sense that, briefly, I think we do a lot better in terms of deploying electric vehicles if we put those vehicles into fleets, because those are the vehicles that are on the road all the time, and those are the organizations where they have the mentality that they're looking at the overall cost of ownership, life cost of ownership. So that's a great place to get exposure to vehicles as well. And I would say that I agree with you with respect to your point about the Hummer or any large vehicle that's got that size of a battery. Our perspective as a trade association has always been about greenhouse gas emissions reduction and how to achieve that in the most optimal way. And to your point, when you look at a 200 kilowatt hour battery, you could put, I don't know how many hybrids on the road, but a lot of hybrids on the road and achieve far more greenhouse gas emissions reduction by deploying hybrids. So what I would say is it's not a silver bullet solution, it's a silver buckshot solution, and we need to look at all these different technologies and ways to really bring down greenhouse gas emissions.
Yes, I wanted to add this fact that BC is, for some reason, following the rest of North America, although they have a different perspective and culture and viewpoint. And that should change to address this problem. We can't ban cars with big batteries. That's not the solution. Someone wants to buy it, but where is my alternative or your alternative to ride a small vehicle with a lower battery, lower weight, and more efficient? And that's again the industry problem, that there's many companies or even the automakers are not interested to offer small vehicles in this market because we are considered and perceived as a part of Canada market or as a part of North American market for a company like Volkswagen. To me, the solution would be the governments and municipalities to start encouraging people and businesses to bring this level, this scale of cars or mobility devices to the picture by being the first to use, like as Simon just mentioned, like be the first city to utilize for your police, for your like certain utility, urban services, and then people see more and more of these vehicles, and these more vehicles will be more and more available with more customer service and sales, and that should be the avenue that we has to get to what we want.
Thank you. So I think we are more than out of time. Thank you to everyone who
That's
asked
almost
questions.
irrelevant
I know
when
there
you
were a
have
bunch
smaller
of people who had
vehicles.
other questions. We will be off to
Then
the
you're
side of the
encouraging people
stage
to get them.
shortly. So
Yeah.
if you still want to ask your questions, come up and grab us. And thank you so much to the panelists. Can I get a quick round of applause for our panelists?